Well, just a few of the celebrities coming out about their personal stories about mental health. These issues were once cloaked in secrecy, and it seems we're now safe to talk about depression and suicide. But is talking enough? What about the 500,000 Canadian youth on a waiting list for mental health treatment? And what about our military veterans? How do we fix a system intended to help that is a mess? We'll hear from a young dad and pastor who looks like he and his church have it all together, even though clinical depression is part of real life there. How does Pastor Lucas Cooper pull it off? And Sheldon Neal speaks with a doctor who says keep the spiritual connected to the medical when it comes to treatment for mental health. Let's begin our look at mental health with a key Canadian community asking for help: veterans suffering post-traumatic stress disorder.
It was a triple homicide and suicide.
In rural Nova Scotia, a catastrophic case of a former Canadian soldier, Lionel Desmond, killed his mother, his wife, and 10-year-old daughter before taking his own life. Lionel Desmond was just 33 years old. Family members say he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after a tour in Afghanistan in 2007. Nova Scotia has a high number of younger veterans. Our reporter Molly Thomas here with some statistics on mental health in veterans across Canada. Molly, what did you find?
You know, Lorna, the aftermath of Afghanistan is starting to really rear its ugly head now. As we know, more than 40,000 Canadian soldiers served in Afghanistan over a 12-year period. And basically at the beginning and end of that time frame, Statistics Canada surveyed soldiers on their mental health. So let's take a look at what they found.
Okay.
As you can see on this chart, on the far left column, we were talking about depression, and not a lot has changed within a decade. Then we look on the far right side. You see some movement upwards in the years past, but the one to really watch is the middle one. Rates of PTSD doubled in a decade, going from 2.8% to 5.3%. And they also found that more women from the military are suffering from PTSD than men.
So why aren't our soldiers getting the help they need?
Because there's a lot of them, Lorna, there's a lot. About 10% of all soldiers who served in Afghanistan suffer from PTSD. Remember, this was the largest Canadian deployment since World War II. So, the Liberals have promised changes, allocating $78 million to cut down wait times to see specialists. They have 24-hour talk lines, but a lot of people are saying this is not enough. For example, I looked into the JPSU program. It was established in 2008. The whole point was to help struggling soldiers either take a break from service or even transition back into civilian life if they're having medical problems. But the issue is there's been staffing issues, positions haven't been filled, and that eventually leaves soldiers alone. I think the worst thing with PTSD is that you can't be left on your own.
Okay, you've talked with Romeo Dallaire. You've listened to what he has to say. What have you learned?
Well, everyone knows Honorable Romeo Dallaire from Rwanda and the tragedies that he's seen abroad. And he speaks out very, very candidly about his own struggles and what it's like to live with this illness. Let's take a look at this clip.
There is no stability in the emotional framework of the individual. You don't know what will trigger you to go off the deep end, as we would say. You don't know what will trigger you to be aggressive, even to your own, to destroy, to try to lash out, to scream. You're not necessarily sure what ultimately the end result will be, because this is an injury that can be terminal.
It's so terminal, Lorna, that we're seeing, unfortunately, suicides in our own nation.
Molly, thank you very much for this. And we're now going to go to a veteran. We wanted to hear from an Afghan war vet who lives with PTSD every single day. Jamie McWhirter was deployed to Kandahar in 2006. He details the struggles of his illness in A Soldier's Return, My Battle with PTSD. And Jamie joins us via Skype from St. John's, Newfoundland. Jamie, thank you for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Jamie, the country is heartbroken at the loss of an entire family in Nova Scotia on account of PTSD. When you heard about that tragedy, you actually immediately began to find if you could find veterans there in Upper Big Tracadie. Why?
My first thought was I try to put myself in his position. What would push him to do such a horrific thing. I know myself, my family is my lifeline. If it wasn't for them, I don't think I would be here, because like, if you read in my book, there was a time that I thought the world and my family was better off without me, and I did try to commit suicide. But to feel that loss, that he took his family with him, I can't even imagine what he was going through.
How has this affected you as veterans, the terrible tragedy of Lionel Desmond and his family?
Well, we're all saddened by it. I mean, it's another brother lost. I mean, you look at the statistics right now. There's been more soldiers that went over to Afghanistan that have died from suicide than have actually died over there. So it's, we're all saddened by the whole thing.
I love what you've created. We're going to talk about your family in a minute, but you talk about yourselves as a brotherhood, and there are some studies that say the isolation you as our veterans are feeling when you come back to Canada is not helping it. Is that some of it, that you've lost your teammates as a support group?
Well, I don't know if we've lost them. PTSD was, for me, back 10 years ago when I came home from Afghanistan. I didn't talk about it because I didn't even know what it was. I mean, in World War I, it was called shell shock. In World War II, it was called battle fatigue. And now we call it PTSD. So it's always been there, but nobody ever talked about it. So as a soldier, you're almost scared to talk about it.
Well, thank you for creating the Facebook group. You've got chat rooms. You've got a couple thousand of you as veterans in PTSD Buddies. You can find all that on our website. Talk to us about your family helping you. Tell us the story about your 6-year-old who caught you in a trigger place in a shopping mall.
Well, I learned quickly that I first tried to hide it from my kids, and kids are smart. You can't hide it from them. So I knew to beat PTSD, I needed my family. So I've taught grounding techniques, which are like, when a soldier gets triggered, and if he deals with anger and he gets angry, I call them grounding techniques, so they can settle back down and calm themselves again. So I taught my son Cody, who was 6 at the time, some of these grounding techniques. And one day he wanted to go to the mall, and I'm not good in crowds, but I want to be a good dad, so I go to the mall. And as soon as we get in there, there's a lot of people, and I'm already like looking at everybody, thinking everyone is looking at me and everyone is judging me. And then I look for the exits, and then I'm wondering who is a threat there. And Cody, at 6 years old, could see that I was triggered. And he took me by the hand and he said, "Dad, I need to go to the bathroom. Can you come with me?" So he led me to the bathroom, and right then, I had a purpose. I wasn't thinking about the crowd. I was thinking about my son, so I had a purpose. So I just followed him to the bathroom. And he brought me right into the stall, which at the time I thought was weird because he never wanted me in the stall with him. But as soon as we got in the stall, he locked it and he took me by the hand. He said, "Dad, I don't need to pee. I could tell you were triggered. Do you want to do a breathing exercise or a grounding technique?"
Wow.
And I started to cry right there, and I fell to my knees and I hugged him because I knew I wasn't alone. I mean, even at 6 years old, he knew how to calm me down. He knew how to bring me back.
Jamie, you've just done so much to tell us all that we need each other on this. Thank you for serving our country overseas. Thank you for creating PTSD Buddies. And thank your wife and kids for hanging in there with all of this and teaching the nation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sheldon, over to you now. I think that's got to get social media thinking about the reality of mental health.
Thank you so much, Lorna. I indeed wanted to get a feel of what's happening on the street from viewers, so I asked a few people about their thoughts on the issue of mental health. Here's what one had to say.
My mother-in-law, she works in a psych ward in Oakville, so it's one of those things. But I guess the politics ahead of the people on the front lines is more concerning. So I don't know if it's the psychologist I have questions for. It's more the politicians on why they limit the budgets for people trying to take care of people the right way.
And here's what's trending as well on the topic on social media. I want to take a look at this first one here. I'm going to make it large so you can see it on your screen. Olympic medalist Clara Hughes, of course, leading the popular hashtag Bell Let's Talk, helping to really talk about the stigma surrounding mental illness. Of course, she was not the only person discussing that today. Governor General David Johnston tweeting that he met with members of the RCMP to learn about their mental health strategy, and something that we're really excited about here at Context. I'll bring it up on the screen for you there. We want to get you involved early on the conversation. Before every program, I'm going to be posting a video talking about today's subject or the topic of that day, and that gives you an idea and an opportunity to get involved. Leave your comments, leave your questions, and we'll talk about it on air. Of course, at Context, we're all about two-way conversation. I see some of you messaging me right now. Look forward to hearing it.
And the adolescent years are the time of the lifespan where most of the severe mental disorders arise and can be diagnosed for the first time. So depression, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, psychosis such as schizophrenia, bipolar illness, manic depression, the eating disorders, substance abuse. If I was to say, look at all the people that die by suicide, what proportion of them have a mental disorder? The vast majority do.
Well, that's a staggering fact from Dr. Stan Kutcher. A call to action for us that mental health issues begin in childhood. And joining me now is Dr. Jane Story. She is a registered psychologist and a founding partner of a practice that uses non-drug therapies to treat and support those walking through mental illness. Dr. Story, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Why does it start in childhood?
Well, many psychological disorders end up starting out of developmental issues. And so,
Like what?
Well, when you're dealing with children who have issues such as autism or attention deficit disorder, those are very much something that begins in childhood. It's not something that someone through the course of their life ends up developing. It's already there.
But what about depression? What about anxiety?
Well,
what about eating disorders?
Right. So those kinds of things can develop at any point in a person's life.
So you're doing non-drug therapy.
That's right.
How? What is it?
It's talk therapy. There are many different kinds. There are specific talk therapies that are indicated for particular psychological disorders. And we know from the research that for most of the common disorders, psychotherapy is as or more effective than drug therapy.
Do I have to be a professional to do it? That sounds like talk with grandma, talk with auntie, talk with somebody.
It does take a number of years of school to try to become proficient at using these talk therapies and to know which one is indicated for which disorder. So it's not just talking. I always think that if I'm doing it well, people think they're just talking to me, that we're just having a conversation, but there's really more going on. So we're trying to get people to process things that have happened to them, to make connections, in their minds about, why they feel a certain way. When did that happen? Why did it start?
So what could be a good psychotherapy question that would be, or are they too dangerous to give to normal lay people like ourselves?
So a good
question. Okay, so I know my young teen is depressed. She doesn't want to talk to me. What would be a good question to open things up?
Well, I would probably go along the lines of, I'm noticing you're not doing as well as you were before. Is something going on that you want to talk to me about? It's okay to sometimes feel down. Why don't we figure it out together and maybe we can turn it around? In psychotherapy, if I had a patient sitting there with me, I'd be looking at, how long has this been going on and how do you really feel? Because we see a lot of misdiagnosing, particularly in young people. So they complain of a symptom or two and people, say, oh my goodness, I think that they must be having issues with, attention deficit, or they're having a significant depression. And then when we see them, we realize they don't meet criteria for those, and it might be something else. So I think that it's important, if you're concerned about your child, to get a really good diagnosis.
And I'm so encouraged that you don't have to use medication.
You do not.
Do doctors like you? Like, I mean, you are a psychotherapist, but it's a very controversial thing that you can do without
Psychologists and family
medications.
physicians work very close together. There are times when adding a medication makes sense. So if someone, for example, has post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what I spend most of my time doing, the treatment for that can be quite upsetting, and you don't want it to be re-traumatizing. So in some cases, it's helpful to have a sleeping medication. Particularly if someone is haunted by nightmares. Sometimes it's helpful to have a really short-acting anti-anxiety medication.
Okay.
So if they're feeling panicky. So I see a medication as a useful adjunct.
Well, coming up, Sheldon will have an interview with an ICU doctor who speaks about mental health in a different light, the spiritual and the mental, right along with your faith culture.
Well, as you know, I'm a family doctor, and I don't think a day ever went by in the years that I worked as a family doctor when I didn't deal with the fact that Canadians are affected by mental illness.
And we'll hear from our federal Minister of Health, Jane Philpott, about the shocking number of young Canadians who are on a waiting list for mental health help. Next week on Context, we tackle football and hockey head injuries. Are we risking too much on the field? We take a look at that next week.
Dreams do come true. PureFlix Canada is now available on a device near you. With over 3,500 faith and family titles, there is something for everyone. Start your free 1-month trial today at pureflix.com.
Memorable moment for me when I sat down with the health minister a few weeks ago to speak about the opioid crisis. You can see that show on our website at contextwithlorna.com. But here's what captured me after the interview. Listen how Minister Philpott described the staggering number of young Canadians waiting for mental health help.
Well, as you know, I'm a family doctor, and I don't think a day ever went by in the years that I worked as a family doctor when I didn't deal with the fact that Canadians are affected by mental illness, and there are none of us that are unaffected. And when I look at the fact that there are something like 550,000 kids under the age of 25 that are on waiting lists to get access to mental health care, I realized that this is something we absolutely have to push for. So I'm absolutely delighted. The Prime Minister is completely committed to helping to make sure Canadians have access to mental health care. He asked me to do something about that, to make sure we get care that's needed to kids so that they can get back to work, get back to school, enjoy a happy and healthy and meaningful life. And investments in mental health care are absolutely essential for Canadians.
Well, we cannot wait for our government to fix 550,000 young Canadians under the age of 25 with mental health. That is all of our jobs. Well, my next guest is a pastor who suffers with depression, and he's not alone. The Canadian Mental Health Association says 8% of adults, almost 2.9 million Canadians, will experience major depression in their lifetime. Lucas Cooper is pastor at Bayview Glen Church, and I spoke with him yesterday to discuss his personal story.
I went through a difficult time in my life, specifically the ending of a really important relationship to me, and I was going through some things just, emotionally and even physically, and sleeping a lot and things like that. My parents indicated maybe I should talk to a pastor, which I did, and that pastor indicated I should talk to my family doctor. And, they tested me for anemia and just all that kind of stuff, and took blood and did an ECG, and all came back well. And my family doctor asked me if I had ever heard of clinical depression. And at the age of 20, I had not. And he explained to me what clinical depression was and some of the symptoms of clinical depression. And I said, wow, that sure sounds like me. And that was really the first time I ever was even introduced to the idea of mental health, mental illness, and specifically clinical depression.
I'm sure that in your role as helping people as a pastor, this must come up a lot. Explain that a bit, does it?
Yeah, it does. But interestingly enough, sometimes in the church, and specifically in communities of faith, we like to put on the all is well face. And we get locked down by shame a little bit when it comes to mental health, along with a number of other issues that we might face in life. So really, it started to come up a lot more when I shared my own personal journey from the platform, and it was like, it was like that kind of open Pandora's box of people coming forward and saying, "Well, that's me too. That's me too." And then it started to come up quite a bit more once I was really honest with my congregation in terms of my struggles with mental health.
Okay, so give us tools. Give us how you make life work. You're very productive. It hasn't been a quick whitewash fix or anything like that. How does this work? Living with mental health, living publicly, being a productive person. How do you put it all together?
Sure. Gosh, there are a lot of things that I did personally. One of them was medication. That was really constructive for me. Personally, that's not always constructive for everybody. I mean, that's something you consult with your physician about and so on and so forth, which I did, but that was constructive for me. Learning more about, because knowledge really helps when it comes to mental health and mental illness. Specifically, a book called When Life Goes Dark by Richard Winter was extremely constructive for me. Number 3 would be just sharing it with close friends and trusted family. My struggles with mental health, it's always good to have trusted people in my life that I'm able to process those things with. And then, specifically even being a man of faith, getting honest with God about some of these things and saying, "Hey, I don't feel right. I can't get my brain to work. And I just kind of want to bring that to you." So those are a couple of tools for me that have been helpful. No one of those tools, like you indicated, is kind of the key that unlocks the door and frees you from kind of any kind of mental health, mental illness, situation or diagnosis that you might be dealing with. But all of those things together have moved me down the path. I'm not done with my journey with mental illness and mental health and clinical depression, but it sure moved me down the road further.
And just talk to us about the spiritual component of moving down the road, of keeping one foot going in front of another.
Yeah, thanks, Lorna, for that question. I think sometimes we compartmentalize ourselves. And so we say we kind of have a spiritual self, and then we have a physical self, and then we have an emotional self. And for me, one of the things that my journey with clinical depression has kind of revealed to me over time is that there's just one me. There's not the physical me and the emotional me and the spiritual me. So when I begin to take care of all of those aspects of who I am, when I, do better with my diet and exercise, when I do better with my sleeping habits, that's the physical side. When I'm processing things with a counselor and with trusted friends and in community. And then the spiritual aspects of who I am, when I get quiet, when I get alone, when I spend time in God's Word, when I meditate on the truth of who I am as is declared by God, the one who made me, rather than how I feel about me. All of those aspects kind of work together, again, to move me further down the road.
That was Reverend Lucas Cooper joining us from Toronto. Well, Sheldon, over to you for social media.
Thank you so much, Lorna. I want to turn to Sammy, a viewer. He wrote, "I have friends and family members that struggle with depression and anxiety. Thank you for being a space to discuss." And I want to turn to something that was a viewer actually on Facebook Live, Lorna. Josie, she wrote quite an extensive, I'm going to pull up on screen for you, quite an extensive post, but she said she struggled for the last 2 years with anxiety and depression. The last thing she says, like the butterfly, we go through darker seasons, but like in the cocoon, we've been made to fly. Very touching. Thank you. That's our social media update. Keep it coming.
Next week on Context, we tackle football and hockey head injuries. Are we risking too much on the field? We take a look at that next week.
PureFlix.com is now available in Canada. Sign up today for your free 1-month trial and begin streaming over 3,500 titles.
It's from independent films to movies and short series.
Kids shows. Sign up for a free month. Give it a good try.
Watch your favorite content anywhere, anytime, like PureFlix original hit series Encounter. Enjoy the latest and best in faith and family entertainment. Available to you at the click of a button. Visit PureFlix.com and sign up for your free trial today. Brought to you by Crossroads.
I recently had the chance to speak with Dr. Harrison Mungle, who works in the ICU at a major Toronto hospital. Dr. Mungle differentiates mental health from mental illness. He also speaks to how faith groups have really responded to mental illness with stigmatization and says that's not the way forward. Getting rid of the shame and stigma in our society is what's needed. Take a look.
So mental health will be someone who is struggling with stressors, for example, that affects their mind and how they function from a day-to-day basis. Mental illness is when someone have a diagnosis and there are certain criteria that they need to fit under the DSM-5 in order to be diagnosed with a mental illness.
How do you bring the two together, the practical and the spiritual, when kind of relating to patients? How do you bridge those gaps?
Well, you know, when I see patients and they come in with mental illness, for example, some who are Christians or who are in the faith world, they may have a belief that it's all spiritual related. And we know that medication is one of the cure for mental illness, just like it is for medical illnesses as well. But medication is not the cure in life. It's part of the cure. And so I explain to patients that if it is spiritual, then medication cannot cure spirit. So the same way if you have a headache and you pray for the headache and you don't get healed, you take a Tylenol. God give man the wisdom to create some form of medication for headaches. It's the same principle with mental illness. So pray on the medication and see if it's spiritual related or if it's mentally related.
Talk to me about the shame and stigma associated with mental health and mental illness.
I think the shame and stigma, it's being addressed, and I'm really grateful that more and more agencies are coming forth and supporting mental health and mental illnesses in general. I think a lot of it has to do with culture, people's different culture and people's different beliefs, because in the past, mental illness was considered something that you're crazy and therefore we need to put you in asylum or we need to put you in some institution. In today's society, we know that in Canada, 1 out of 5 suffers with a mental illness, so that's the prediction. In some cases, they say 1 out of 3 have a mental illness or suffers with mental health. So it's becoming more prominent with the stresses people go through that affects their mind, that culture and people's belief are being altered to understanding the concept of really what is mental illness and differentiating mental health as well.
So what's the most asked question we get about mental health? I'm most often asked, why doesn't God fix it? Let's just go back to those celebrity voices that have launched mental health awareness into the public space. These high-profile details of inner struggle are actually a new twist on a very old story, because the Bible has remarkable celebrities that also had mental health challenges, from depressed Job and Hannah to suicidal Elijah and Jonah. Even King David struggled with deep depression and anxiety. The Apostle Paul is long suspected to have suffered from depression. I'd say, given his near-death encounters, maybe he faced and persevered as best as he could. So, the fact that mental health challenges are all over the stories of the Bible, and since the Bible is God's oldest narrative with the human race, I think there's a clue that together with God, we can manage this. Managing mental health is not fun. Mental health is hard on families and relationships, but it is not forever. There are breaks of sunshine, and there is great mental health caring that is part of being God's community together. I'm Lorna Dueck. For all of us, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being part of our village.